Seoul, October 2025. The air above the Han River trembles with autumn wind and the faint hum of traffic. Inside a private lounge tucked within one of Seoul's glass towers, the world seems to hold its breath. Beyond the panoramic windows, the city flickers like 1,000 restless thoughts. Inside, only two people sit at a small round table. A single recorder between them. Its red light glowing faintly like a pulse. Sun Yejin arrives first. She wears no makeup heavy enough to disguise the faint lines of sleeplessness beneath her eyes. Her fingers trace the rim of her teacup as if searching for the right temperature to begin. She glances toward the door every few seconds. Breaths shallow. Her eyes fixed yet uncertain. When Hyun finally steps in, silence thickens. He greets her softly, no handshake, no hug. Just a nod that carries the weight of everything they never said. "We agreed to speak," she whispers. "But not to defend." The recorder clicks on. The sound is small. It cuts through the tension like glass. For a long while, neither of them speaks again. Outside, distant camera flashes pierce the night. Proof that the world is still watching. Inside, time seems to stop where their eyes meet. They begin with laughter, dry, just laughter, the kind used to cover something fragile. Yejin says she thought she'd forgotten the sound of her own name once spoken by him. He says it feels strange to talk without pretending to be characters. The first few minutes feel rehearsed, almost polite. But then, something shifts. The tone breaks. Their smiles dissolve, leaving behind two weary people who have run out of ways to hide. "I don't know when it started feeling like a performance," she murmurs. "Maybe it was the night after our drama ended. Everyone called us a fairy tale, but real life isn't written that way." He nods, eyes fixed on the table. "I thought I could protect us if I stayed quiet. I was wrong." The story rewinds itself, back to 2019. To the moment they met on the set of Crash Landing on You. Back then, the air was charged with something new. Something electric. She remembers the way he looked at her during the first script reading. The brief pause before his lines. A spark that fans would later call fate. They didn't plan for love, it grew quietly. Like ivy climbing a wall. But when the show exploded into a worldwide phenomenon, that wall turned into glass. "At first, I thought fame would protect us," Yejin says, her voice trembling. "It didn't. It trapped us." Every red carpet appearance became a ritual of perfection. Every casual smile was dissected, magnified, and sold as proof of their happiness. They traveled to Tokyo for press events, to Busan for premieres, to Los Angeles for endorsements. Everywhere they went, the noise followed. Yet, the louder the applause grew, the quieter their private world became. "There were moments I didn't recognize us," Hyun confesses. "We were surrounded by people, but it felt like no one really saw us." Insiders whispered about creative differences. Stylists spoke about arguments that never happened. Tabloids turned missed appearances into proof of crisis. The public's obsession, once flattering, began to suffocate. "It wasn't another person," he says quietly, glancing at her. "It was the world." Their love, once spontaneous, became scheduled. They met between shoots, in empty trailers, parked cars under neon signs. They learned to speak in coded messages, to smile when they wanted to scream. Their home in Hanam-dong, once a secret haven, became a fortress. The noise of helicopters hovering nearby drowned out the peace they tried to build. Yejin remembers the silence at night. He'd fall asleep first, his phone glowing with notifications from producers and fans alike. She'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how something so right could feel so distant. Sometimes she'd step out onto the balcony and watch the river below, glimmering like a silver ribbon under the moonlight. "I used to think if I looked long enough," she says, "I'd see who we were before the world interfered." There were good days too, days of laughter, shared coffee, and late-night ramen in disguise at small restaurants. But even those moments were haunted by the fear of being seen. The more they tried to hold on to normalcy, faster it slipped away. Then came the trip to Paris. A magazine photoshoot. A whirlwind of stylists and cameras. One evening, after hours of posing beneath studio lights, Yejin found herself alone in a hotel corridor, staring at her reflection. Hyun was in another room, discussing contracts. She overheard someone joke about how the perfect couple was barely speaking. She smiled at the comment then, but later that night, When she knocked on his door and he didn't answer, something inside her cracked. A week later, a journalist leaked an audio clip, a short phone call between them, muffled, tense. It wasn't incriminating, but it sounded cold. Fans panicked. Articles multiplied. Words like distance and drift replaced destiny. The myth began to crumble. When you're us, Hyun says now. It's almost a whisper. A rumor becomes truth before you can deny it. For months, they tried to hold on. They avoided each other at industry dinners. Through endorsements. Posted polite photos with captions that said nothing. Behind the scenes, messages went unanswered. And silence became their language. Managers called it breathing space. Their hearts called it goodbye. The final scene of part 1 unfolds on a quiet evening in Cheongdam-dong. Restaurant with low light, soft music, and a table set for two. The waiter recognizes them but says nothing. They order wine and don't drink it. He picks at the bread. He stares at her plate. There are no arguments, no shouting. Just exhaustion heavy enough to crush air. Let's stop pretending we're fine, he says finally. His voice steady but low. He looks up. Her eyes are wet but fierce. Then what are we? He doesn't answer. He can't. Outside, the city hums on. Oblivious. The river flows. Silent and indifferent. They leave the restaurant. They walk in opposite directions. No goodbye, no promises. The faint scent of her perfume lingering in the cold air. And the unspoken truth that love, worshipped by millions, had become too heavy to carry in silence. Back at the Han River Lounge. Recorder's light flickers again. Yejin exhales slowly. Like releasing years of weight. Maybe, she says softly. We had to fall apart to see what was real. He looks at her then, really looks, and for the first time that night, something human returns to his face. Storm isn't over yet. But for the first time, they are both ready to stand in the rain. 6 months later, the Han River breathes again beneath the fading autumn sun. The same private lounge where everything ended now holds a different kind of silence, one that feels less like an ending and more like a beginning that no one dared hope for. The curtains are drawn halfway. Light spilling over 2 cups of coffee untouched on the table. The city hums outside. Unaware that 2 of its most watched souls are about to speak again, not as actors, not as icons, but as 2 human beings stripped of all defense. Hyun arrives first this time. His posture is still formal, but his eyes are less guarded. There's a hint of calm that wasn't there before. Something learned from solitude. Sun Yejin walks in quietly moments later. Wearing a simple white coat. Her hair falls naturally over her shoulders, no makeup. No stylists, no entourage. First time in years, there's no script. No PR team waiting outside. Only them. If we speak, he begins. It has to be together. She nods. There's no hesitation. The air between them carries the weight of forgiveness, not given in words, but in presence. The recorder hums to life again, red light steady. They talk first about the months apart, how silence, once painful, had become a mirror. Hyun describes the first morning he woke up without checking his phone. Without the instinct to perform calmness for the world. Learned how to hear my own thoughts again, he says. Every one of them. Her voice was still there. Yejin smiles faintly. Out of pride but recognition. I stopped reading the news about us. She confesses. One day, I realized I didn't need to know what strangers thought of my love story. I needed to remember how it began. The reason they agreed to speak again wasn't publicity, it was exhaustion. Rumors had grown monstrous. Moving beyond control. Words like divorce, betrayal, and irreconcilable became daily headlines. She received letters from fans begging her to explain. He was accused of selfishness, ambition, coldness. Every silence became proof of guilt. We weren't broken, she says softly. We were misunderstood. He looks at her then, eyes heavy. We were never perfect, he admits. But we were real. That phrase lingers in the room like incense. Real. It's a word that never belonged to celebrity life, too raw, too unpolished. But here, in this dim lounge, it feels sacred. They recount what the world didn't see, the sleepless nights. It's about nothing. The weight of 2 careers constantly under scrutiny. There were days when she locked herself in the bathroom to cry quietly. Not because of betrayal, but because of the unbearable pressure to be flawless. were days when he stared at scripts and couldn't remember if the emotions were his or the characters. Sometimes, Hyun says, I envied people who could hold hands on the street without looking over their shoulder. I used to imagine walking along the Han River with her like ordinary people do. Yejin laughs softly, almost shyly. Still do that, she says. Maybe now. No one would care. He smiles for the first time, small, invisible, but sincere. Then she admits something heavier. During their time apart, she thought about quitting acting. The constant pressure, the endless scrutiny of being watched even in loneliness, it had drained her completely. But one night, while watching one of their old films on television, caught herself smiling. I realized that love wasn't the only thing the world couldn't take from me, she says. It was my truth. As part of that truth, they both go quiet. The sound of the city fades behind the glass. What comes next isn't rehearsed. Hyun reaches into his pocket and places a folded piece of paper on the table. It's a letter, crumpled, water-stained. This months ago, he says. I didn't know if I'd ever give it to you. She hesitates, then unfolds it. Writing is rough, uneven, a man unaccustomed to confession. The words read simply. Never find peace. I hope it's not because we gave up. I hope it's because we learned to be honest. Tears gather in her eyes. But she doesn't look away. Then let's be honest now, she says. And so they are. They talk about the real breaking point, not the phone call or the gossip, but the moment they stopped listening. We're so afraid of disappointing fans, producers, the industry. They forgot to ask what they themselves wanted. I thought love was something to maintain, Yejin says. But it's something you have to keep rediscovering. Hyun nods. I didn't realize how much I relied on silence to avoid pain. But silence can destroy more than anger ever will. When the interview turns to the future, they exchange a look that's part uncertainty, part strength. Neither promises forever. Neither uses the word reconciliation. Instead, they speak of patience, of learning to walk side by side, even if not hand in hand. A few weeks later, the world watches as they appear together again, this time in a televised interview held at the Shilla Hotel in Seoul. The room is bright, decorated simply with white lilies and pale curtains. Guests greet them cautiously, aware of the gravity of the moment. Cameras roll, millions tune in. Takes a deep breath before speaking. Her voice trembles but does not break. We were quiet for too long, she begins. Not protecting our privacy meant hiding our truth. Silence hurt more than the rumors ever could. Hyun adds, we never owed anyone an explanation. But we owe each other honesty. The first time, they admit how fame blurred the lines between love and duty. They talk about late nights filled with anxiety, therapy sessions, the guilt of failing to meet expectations. When asked whether they're together again, exchange a look that says more than words. We're in a place of peace, Yejin replies. And that's enough. He reaches for her hand then. Not for the cameras, but because it's instinct. The audience holds its breath. The image goes viral within hours, the simple gesture of connection becoming the most discussed photo of the year. Headlines across Asia read they chose honesty over perfection. Back at the lounge, after the interview, two sit by the window overlooking the Han River once more. The recorder is off now. No lights, no scripts. Just the quiet hum of the city below. Do you think people will ever stop expecting us to be perfect? She asks. He chuckles softly. I hope not. Keeps us humble. Then, after a pause, he adds, we don't have to be perfect anymore, just real. Smiles, eyes glistening. The tension that haunted them for years seems to dissolve into the night air. The river outside shimmers as if reflecting something new, not the illusion of a fairy tale, but the beauty of survival. Stands, walks toward the glass, and looks out at the city they both love and fear. Maybe love isn't about forever, he says quietly. Maybe it's about courage, to speak, to stay, to start again. Yejin joins him at the window, their reflections blending into one silhouette against the glittering skyline. The noise of Seoul fades into a soft heartbeat, steady and alive. They don't promise eternity. They don't perform closure. They simply exist, honest, scarred, still standing. Outside, the Han River moves on, calm and endless. Inside, people finally do the same.